All right. Well, Josh, thanks for being with us. Go ahead and if you would just share a little bit about what gets you excited in your classroom. I know we've had plenty of conversations about cloud computing. What are some of the things you're doing in your classroom that other folks should know about?
Hi Daniel. Thanks for inviting me today. Cloud computing is one of those topics and tools that, regardless of who you are in industry, you kind of have that. You already have that the basic what you think are understanding of what you think cloud computing is, right? Everything's kind of on the cloud. And in some cases, one might be a bit afraid or fearful of even venturing into that. And in some cases, some faculty or subject matter experts might not even figure that they could even utilize resources in cloud. So um, you know, cloud computing is definitely impacting uh, every industry out there. One of the things that I've mentioned recently in an onboarding session for a program that I was kind of helping to head up is that no matter what industry is, if you tell me the industry and the field that you're working in, I could research and find somewhere where cloud is impacting that very specific field, right? So I could make an argument that this is kind of where everything is heading. And so with that, I tend to try to um, promote a lot of cloud concepts into all of my courses. Aside from that, I've been working with a bunch of organizations, research universities such as Carnegie, Sacred Heart, and European Glasgow University, European universities, Glasgow University, and a lot of colleagues out there from Microsoft and Google over the last 3-4 years on cloud computing curriculum, right? So we've been looking at actually identifying ways in which one could, no matter what type of course you teach, you could actually implement some type of cloud concepts into your courses, right? And there's actually another reason why I tend to try to um, promote cloud concepts into my courses. One, as part of this, is that students don't have a lot of resources, right? They don't have a lot of resources locally. They may have a very limited Chromebook or a very limited laptop in which they can do things. Whereas if we're utilizing cloud resources, they're getting one, the experience, right, in computer science, which they have to have in any aspect of computer science. They have to have that experience. But then two, they're utilizing resources of some type of one of the large cloud providers, right? So they're utilizing their hard drives, their CPUs or their central processing units, right? The whatever technology and hardware it may be, their students utilizing that and not having to utilize their own, right? They don't have to go out and purchase some really what we call beefy desktop or laptop in order to actually do their lab experience or homework. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are some instances where you've seen cloud computing or those cloud concepts make a difference in your teaching?
Oh, it's let's see. So one example right now where I'm utilizing that is, or some of these concepts is in Com 203 or computer systems, where they don't necessarily have to have a full understanding of how these cloud tools work, nor do they have to have a full understanding of how to even develop websites. right? In this case, there's a marketplace in some of these or in all these cloud providers. They have what they call a marketplace, where in many cases it's kind of a one-click deploy, where it's just a one button click and it sets up the entire environment, right? And it gives you a display response where all you have to do is just kind of follow those set instructions, right? So no matter who you are and what type of field or industry, if you can typically follow those instructions, like we all know we can do, especially when we get furniture instructions, right? And we can all follow those. This is in the same way, right? That these are the same type of instructions where a student or a learner would just have to kind of click through to kind of finish that. And in this case, I'm giving first year and sophomore students an opportunity to actually create a real basic website without even having to have extensive knowledge of that background, right? They can just deploy an entire website, go through, drag and drop any contents based off of a guiding framework that I give them, what they need to hit, and then that's it. So and then in another case where I'm trying to kind of cover certain concepts of how communication even happens online. How someone connects to a website in the back end response. So now I'm able to give freshmen or sophomore students a kind of a visual representation of how these theoretical concepts are actually happening, right? We may talk about it, they may read about it in a book, but now they can actually visually see it happen, right? They can see the background, they can see what's happening.
That's a great way to implement active learning. We always try to find ways to have our students, get their hands messy, if you will, with the theories and the concepts that they learn. And this sounds like a great way to have them do that in one that is relatively low stakes. I'm sure you grade these projects, but like you said, you give them the instructions. They have a handbook, they have a guide, and they have a knowledgeable professor to lean on, but they have to do the work of making it function correctly, which is, I think it's a great way to learn that type of skill.
Well, and even in this case, they don't even have to know how it functions, right? They don't even have to have an understanding of the back end so much, especially at a freshman or sophomore level, right? They get to deploy, but they get to kind of play around and get some exposure so that when they move into their next course, like, because like in this case, Com 203 is the foundational course for all the comp sci courses, right? And so we're giving them a little bit of exposure to everything. And so in this case, we're giving them that exposure. Now, when they get into networking, they can say, oh, you know what? I did see some of these concepts back in 203, and now it's maybe making a bit more sense.
Sure. It's a great way to lay that groundwork that they're going to need a foundation to do the next steps. So what are some of the tools that you lean on or that you like to use to achieve your instructional goals?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because one of the hardest thing, right, for any faculty, I think, is being able to find resources, right? Being able to utilize something, especially given in an environment where students are already paying for tuition, they're already paying for books, they're already paying for this, that, and the other thing, right? So we need to be able to limit what the expense is, right? What the cost is for the students. So it just so happens, because I've been working with a number of colleagues over the last few years in cloud curriculum concepts, we've been trying to kind of tackle that issue, and from a computer science perspective, right? Being able to get all of that out there, and a lot of the cloud providers in this case, like Amazon, AWS, Microsoft or Azure, or even Google, also called GCP, they all have their own resources and education programs. Out of that, I'm most familiar with both Google and Azure's cloud resources, right? And so from that perspective, I'm able to actually obtain what we could call credits, or $50 worth of resources on Google's platform. And so, there's an education program that they have that's specific to educators of all type, right? So it's not limited to just computer science. This could be for anyone, any type of faculty, if you want to utilize Google's resources. And in this case, they end up giving faculty and any type of grad assist or teacher assist credits or dollar amounts, $100 amounts for faculty to use. And then they also end up giving students $50 worth of credit resources to utilize. So that's one of those things that I'm working on actually developing for you guys to kind of demo, to show how you can actually kind of go through and register for those to obtain those credits. Azure is another one. Azure is Microsoft's cloud resource environment, and they have there's a couple different education programs out of that. They have Azure DevTools for teaching, which essentially, as a Azure DevTools school, we have access to all the products, all the Microsoft programs that are available through that particular program. And that's another thing that I'll demo a bit later. And then out of that, they have another program, which is the Azure for Education, which they just kind of recently implemented, started up, which we just kind of, St. Leo just joined as part of a broader program with Carnegie Mellon University. So this particular program is a new program. It's still being established, but out of that, there's 5 main learning resources that any faculty within St. Leo can actually get a hold of and teach. And so out of that, Microsoft has a given set of learning resources, PowerPoints to labs, to assessments and assignments, right? All free of charge, no cost. You just have to be a part of this Azure for Education program, which I'm considered the program coordinator for St. Leo for this. And the 5 areas are Azure Fundamentals, which is just understanding the Azure Microsoft environment. Azure AI, which is their artificial intelligence, knowing how to kind of set up and implement some type of artificial intelligence, machine learning environment. Another one is Azure Data Fundamentals. So in that case, that one I think might be very usable for any of my business colleagues that are really interested in marketing, data analysis, anything having to do with maybe some type of understanding of data. In fact, you could probably even go as far as social work, psychology. They could even benefit from that particular learning path. Then there's also other paths like Power Platform, which is part of that BI, Power BI, and Dynamics 365. So those are other ones that the business side could probably utilize within their in their particular fields if they choose to.
Absolutely. I'm just thinking now,
But
there's even for education majors, there's a lot of ed grad programs that are implementing some
yes,
kind of data analytics course. So, that really
see,
does collect the whole spectrum. Anybody who's collecting data and looking to interpret that for use in any way would benefit from that kind of program.
yeah, no, absolutely. And see, and you just raised a really good point, right? Because we have our master's programs and our doctorate programs, right? And so if you were really interested in even having them utilize any of these resources to actually provide some data, good solid data analysis to help really solidify their research as part of that master's and doctorate program. Here's a good way to go about doing that, right?
Absolutely.
But yeah, yeah, even education perspective, that you could. Here's an example of education. Let's say you wanted to be able to identify FSAs, seeing how students are going through the FSAs right now, right? So here's a point where you can actually do comparable analysis with FSAs on students, certain age ranges and stuff like that. So you can utilize these types of tools like Google's GCP to obtain a financial credit given to use their resources to actually conduct these types of data analysis in your courses. And so now here's where you're actually not only talking theoretical for your students, but you're actually giving them an opportunity to actually understand and actively involved in understanding that data.
That's amazing. Um, so you mentioned, these are $50, $100 credits, or in the case of the GCP program, or Azure is part of the Microsoft package. Is there any cost associated with either of these for individuals or faculty members, or is that all covered because of the affiliations we have through the university?
Yeah, no. So the ones with Google, there's no cost to us. That you just have to submit your class, right? This would be one of those things that in a later lesson here, I'll kind of walk everyone through on how to actually set that up, right? And I'll provide some examples of where you could utilize some of these resources. But it's just a matter of knowing how many are in your class, submitting the class, putting your St. Leo profile in there so they can verify that you're a St. Leo faculty, right?
Hmm.
And then that's it. And one really interesting thing is just for those faculty members that really like to do research, right, and really need to utilize some type of cloud resources. Um, Google actually provides that as another benefit in a separate program for their the educator program that they run. So you can actually ask up to, I think historically I've seen $1,000 or a couple $1,000 worth of resource time, and that's usually Google's neural nets and stuff like that. So there's a lot that you could actually do, which we'll go through at a later time. But there's no cost for that. That's completely free for faculty and free to the students. Right. The only thing students and faculty need is just a web browser and be able to connect to it. Right. Same thing with Azure. Uh, there's a couple different programs that we run through that Microsoft Azure. We're part of this DevTools, or at least the computer science department's been part of this DevTools for teaching, and that actually gives everyone in St. Leo access to a lot of the software on the back end,
Hmm.
right? And you actually can go to Azure right now if you type in DevTools for Education, and you go to login. When you click login, it actually, when you put in your St. Leo email, it actually will link you back to your St. Leo login. This is a kind of a single sign-in process, and then it brings you back to an Azure environment, and then you can just kind of go through and search for any software you need. Then the other, and again, there's no cost for that. Out of that, Microsoft gives you a $200 credit for the year. So you can utilize any of the resources for $200 for that year. And it resets, I believe it resets every year. I have to kind of confirm on that, but it should reset every year. But believe me, you can kind of burn through that $200 credit if you're playing around in there and not careful. The other aspect is what I was talking about a bit earlier. That's the Azure for Education, which is a completely separate program under Microsoft, which we're a part of through Carnegie Mellon University. And out of there, this is kind of a really new, as I mentioned, it's a really new program. And there are those 5 main Microsoft LearnPaths or learning resources that we can utilize. And all of this is free. And Microsoft's actually created an entire curriculum, learning curriculum for anyone to utilize, right? And so you can take and put this in as a course, or you can take and just supplement a course with it. And the only thing Microsoft wants out of that is just a survey. They just want to survey both faculty and students on specific aspects of what they've learned and how it was used, and that's all that Microsoft requires out of it. So there's no cost for that as well.
That's incredible. I know you. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say there was another program that I tend to use for a lot of my courses that I haven't talked about too much, which is Tableau. And that's kind of one of those kind of software as a service out there for data analysis, which is completely separate of all those. Tableau kind of does their own a similar thing where anyone in a faculty can actually reach out and obtain an online course. So students don't even have to download any software, nothing. They'll give them an online classroom for the year. And you can keep reusing that classroom, that same classroom. You just have to change out students, but you can use that classroom, and there's a bunch of sample data set. It's really the full-blown version of Tableau in many respects. So
very cool.
So that was a separate little plug I wanted to put in there as an option.
No, absolutely. In fact, people may be familiar with Tableau in the sense that we just rolled out our faculty leaderboard, and actually Tableau is the tool we use to power that leaderboard. So an example of some of what Tableau can do is available on the CETL website. I wanted to ask you earlier, you've mentioned before in a past conversation about Microsoft credentialing as part of that relationship with Carnegie Mellon. Is that something that's still in the works, or how does that, you get any tidbits of information that might be relevant here?
Yeah. So we actually just finalized our Certiport. So now we are an official Pearson Certiport Center. So out of that, we can, any faculty that are part of this Azure for Education that I'm the program manager for, anyone that wants to be a part of that, certainly reach out to me. But that you have to be a part of that program in order to be able to participate in any of the Microsoft certifications. So out of all those, the Azure Fundamentals, Azure Artificial Intelligence or AI Fundamentals, the Data Fundamentals, the Power Platform, Power BI, and all that, there are certifications that our students can get out of that. And because we're a part of this collaboration effort, our students can actually end up getting their certification utilizing those resources, and that Certiport Center can actually get their certifications at a very, very nominal charge of I think it's $10 or less.
Oh wow!
If you're interested in your business classes and providing some type of data analytics or Power BI certification, here's now an opportunity where you could actually provide certification as part of your course if you really wanted to. As part of the Certiport Center, there are other business certifications and other certifications. I think Adobe was one of them, stuff like that, that we could eventually do. But but it's important to understand that there's two big differences, because we're working under the umbrella of Carnegie with this. Any of the reduced certifications all are being purchased essentially through Carnegie Mellon.
Right.
And so that's why the certification cost is so low for the Azure fundamentals, the Azure AI fundamentals, that Azure data fundamentals, that Power Platform, and Dynamics 365. That's why those certifications are so low. Any of those other ones would be like any other regular center, and we'd have to organize on how to purchase those.
Sure.
So.
Very cool.
Is that a little too much, maybe?
No, that's perfect. And in fact, I don't want to give too much, because I was just about to plug. Josh is going to be hosting a base camp with us. I believe it's. You remember the date on that? May 20th. May 20th at noon.
Yes.
Yeah. So Josh will be hosting a base camp with us May 20th at noon, where he will demonstrate all the things he covered, how to get connected with GCP. A little more details on Azure, and answer any questions anyone might have related to how cloud computing might benefit you in your courses. So I encourage anybody and everybody to come pick Josh's brain May 20th. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Or go ahead.
Yeah, well, that's the key thing, right? How does this apply to me, right? And so I'm definitely going to kind of during that base camp provide some examples on how you can utilize it. But I'm certain, you give me some time, I could find something where it's relevant to your field and industry, and where it could actually be a benefit. Everything from marketing, art, to psychology, social media, sports, business. You wanted to know predictions and March Madness brackets. It's you can use AI ML for that. You want to identify in maybe health sciences, tumors, or images of clouds, or let's say you're doing some kind of a science class and you want to train a machine learning model to identify clouds, or let's say you wanted to look at art pieces. There's a whole host of different ways you can utilize any of these resources, and I'll kind of go through a few examples during that base camp.
That's great. We're excited to have it, and we're looking forward to learning more about cloud computing and how it can impact, all aspects of what we try to do as a university, and improve teaching and learning across the curriculum, which is a great thing, a great step towards the future. So thanks again for your time, and we'll see you on May 20th. Anyone interested in joining us then, please sign up on the CTLE website. And as always, I'm sure Josh will make himself available if anyone has questions. So go ahead and stop the recording.
Thank you.